to play. Where might they tee off?
Yes.
For content?
Hello and welcome to episode 131 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is the marketing and the F is for well you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from techie to CMO and trusted advisor, and each week I chat to the true rock stars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share with you some marketing street knowledge that I hope will inspire your inner rockstar. Come and say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday the 9th of September 2022. I hope you've had a good week. You are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. On this week's episode, in the marketing studio, Jeff Clark and I chat about working with agencies. I go backstage with the CMO of Paddle, Andrew Davies, and I wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the marketing studio with Jeff Clark, Rockstar CMO advisor and former Forrester Serious Decisions research director. This week, he has some advice for working with agencies. Welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO FM, to the studio with Jeff Clark. How are you?
Thank you. Well, thank you for welcoming back and for coming into my studio.
No, you're very welcome. And the topic, because we talk ahead of time. Oh, the first thing is, as we're doing this in real time, and we're talking on Friday, and this goes out tomorrow. How's the weather?
The weather is awesome. We got almost a summer's worth of rain in 2 days, and then the sun came out, and so things are back alive. The lawn looks slightly green.
Yeah.
We probably sent our rain your way because I noticed in the news about the Queen passing and everybody being around the various castles and stuff like that the rain was coming down, pouring. That was just like our Monday and Tuesday. So
yeah. Well,
sorry to send it over to you.
Yeah, not just the weather, but also the news.
I know it was a sad day indeed.
It was a sad day. I was going to make a comment about the fact that I think lawns are a miracle because a few weeks ago ours was dead. And then, like you say, a couple of days of rain, all of a sudden it needs a mow again. It's all green.
Yeah,
which is amazing. But yes, it's a sad day for us here in the UK of losing our Queen. Well, we didn't lose her. We know where she is. But, she's passed away after 70 years of service and 96 years of life. But yes, and we move on from one Elizabethan era to King Charles III.
Yes.
So, there we go.
It is definitely a marker, and certainly we over here on our side we feel like all the news that we get about the royal family, but I mean, she's just been as involved in our consciousness, I guess, for the past 70 plus years as you. So it's it's a big loss.
Absolutely. And we've known nobody else. And like I was saying before, I mean, before we started recording, she's connected us to much of our
Yes.
our who we are as British people.
Yeah, it's like if Franklin Roosevelt lived till today and finally passed away, we'd be like, "Oh my God!"
yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth connects us with the war and so many momentous occasions in this world.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll change gears completely. I don't think there's any segue you can make from the death of a monarch to the topic of this week, which is how we manage the best practices for managing agencies, which is a topic we've prepared and I think is a good one for this week. The reason why is we talk about our effing marketing fundamentals and we talk about branding, which is typically where you'd bring in an agency, but also various other disciplines that you could use some outside help, right? And I'm going to use what you put in the notes and steal this. Onboarding an agency is like onboarding a new hire. You don't have a 1 hour intro and then say, make it happen. This happens for and as you say, this happens for any type of agency. I mean, we use people for SEO, PPC, don't we? Ads, digital, PR, all that stuff. So what's the secret? Say, I've written this wrong in the notes, haven't I? So what say you, Jeff?
Well, I'll first start on, and just to kind of build on what you were just saying about hiring somebody. It's like usually you there are a number of reasons for hiring an agency. One, you don't have the skills in house. Secondly, you maybe you don't want to have the skills and you don't want to hire them. Because that could be one of the things. Do we have an agency do this? Do we hire somebody and we do it in house? And certainly all those things, creative, digital, telesales or whatever. I mean, we've been in organizations where we have brought those things in-house and or used agencies. And the thing is that you have to realize that it's not, just like you wouldn't hire somebody and put them at a desk and, maybe give them a little manual and say, go to it. Although that has happened. But it's not a recipe for success. So I think there's a number of things that you have to think through. And I kind of put together kind of 3 steps for the success of working with a marketing agency. Again, applying to any type of agency from advertising to telesales. And they're kind of little subsets or sub-steps under those. But, I think the first thing to... Oh, go ahead.
Just interrupt you just a second there. I think that was the important point you made there about why it is you would choose an agency, why you bring an agency in, which is skills, right? And scale, isn't it? Those are the 2 primary reasons. Plus, I think with the skills thing, I think when you bring people in-house, you lose something, especially with things like SEO and PPC, because those people have a whole bunch of different clients. They're seeing this stuff every day. They're working with it every day. But if you bring that in-house, they've only got one client. They're not seeing all those permutations and stuff. So I think it's important to make that point ahead of it. So we'll move on to how do you approach it? What are your steps?
Yeah. So first one is set expectations, and I'll piggyback on what you had just said, which is you have to honor their expertise. They've been doing you're bringing them in to do something for you that is that they've been doing for other clients, and so they have built an expertise that you have desired not to bring in house, and so you have to honor that and certainly give them their due when they're providing advice. And a part of that is you're also buying not just their expertise, but their objectivity. They're working for you on the contract basis, but they don't work for you. So they have objective opinions based on whatever they've done in the market. Obviously, if they're doing, SEO, they know what's going on in SEO. They know what's going on with Google and the other search engines. They're tuned into things that you're probably not tuned into. And so you're buying their expertise and their objectivity and how to apply that expertise. And I think another thing from an expectation perspective that is extremely important that I've run into many times is you got to budget the time to manage them. So yes, you're hiring them to do things like that, like the skills and the scale, but you can't just say, after a couple meetings with the key stakeholders, your guys are going to go off and do a bunch of stuff. You really have to work through how you're prepping the agency, how you're feeding them information. You really want to have somebody who's like the liaison, the liaison with agencies and make sure that they're getting what they need, and anything that they need back from you, the client, that they're able to access that through the liaison.
Yeah.
And it's like you just want to make sure that again, you're setting them up for success. And sometimes at the end of projects, I know a number that I've been involved on, it's like you say, gosh, with all the time we put into this, maybe we could have done that. But if the final product is great, you really don't want to sweat it because that's, again, you're buying that expertise and you're buying that. And if you put anything that I've done, particularly some of the work that I did with branding when we were at STL, it's like we put a lot of effort into the agencies that actually delivered for us, and it was well worth the effort.
I think it's hard when you're an internal creative. There's a couple of things on that. I think it's hard when you're an internal creative because you're working with the agency, giving them loads and loads of feedback, and then it comes back basically, and you feel like you did it. It's like, and the agency are getting all the credit, which is a problem. But also, what I've also seen in my career is that you can have senior marketers that basically outsource everything and basically outsource their marketing brain to the agencies, which is a step too far, isn't it?
That is a step too far. Absolutely. No.
But you want to be an intelligent client and understand the subject matter enough, right?
Yeah.
But you still, but then you use them for the skills and scale in order to expand on that. So that first thing I think is really important. I really like that, Jeff, about setting the expectations, especially the amount of time it's going to take for your internal team to care for the agency, right? So what's the next step?
Choose the agency wisely. And this is all about, matches, matches made in heaven or whatever. It's like, so you don't go for the big names, because then, the big name will give you the B team or the C team. Yeah. And it's like, well, geez. And matter of fact, when we were previous, I think, to our work at the company I mentioned before, I mean, they were working with one of the big names, that started with an O, sitting in New York City, that on in terms of branding and advertising. And it's like, what you'll end up with is either something that is too grandiose for your organization, or they put the B team on it, and it's like, well, geez, I'm not satisfied with the results because you basically weren't given the right people the time and attention that the agency could provide. Yeah,
well, I spent some time at McCann in London, so I've actually been on that agency, on the big name agency side, and it gave me such a good education for when I became a CMO, because if you're sitting around a table in a big pitch and you're seeing all of that talent that the agency are showing you, you may not work with that talent.
Yeah.
You need to make it very clear that what they've brought out is their best people for that pitch. You may never see them again. So when you go through that process, make sure that and also the ratio for account management that you've got and all that kind of stuff is all correct. But just make sure that you're going to get to speak to the A player talent that you meet in that pitch is the people that are going to be working on your account.
Absolutely.
Sorry, a little bit of a rant.
No, you're right on. Yep.
We had a really talented guy at McCann, and he mainly did pitches. He was so busy doing pitches that he was hardly doing any client work. It was just incredible. Anyway, so
and I've also been on the inside of agencies where it's like I realize they're using me to bill hours, and I'm not sure I'm doing the right work. But,
well, yeah, that's the other side, isn't it? But that's, it's like the Deloitte or Accenture model, isn't it?
Yeah.
You sell with your most expensive people and try and get the cheapest people to do the work. And that's just the way agencies have to work. But the other thing is I think you need to appreciate that they have a commercial imperative as well, right? So you don't want to screw your agency over. They need to make margin, but that make sure you know who you're going to work with. But
again, that's why choosing the right size reputation, reputation is really important. It's like if you're a small company, you want to work with small companies. If you're mid range, and so looking at their client list and seeing that there is companies like you, maybe not competitors, but companies like you that you can work with. And I think the other thing is to be specific about the competencies you were looking for, and are you looking for an all-purpose agency that's going to do a lot of different types of marketing work, which I know we've both probably worked with in the past, or are you you want some very specific skills, whereas when you get into the things like search engine optimization or telemarketing or whatever, it's like you can find really good organizations that just do that one thing really well, and that's what you're hiring.
Yeah, and I think that small company thing, small agency thing, if you're if you do your research, you can actually, because a lot of really good talent pops out of these big agencies and creates their own agency.
Absolutely.
And you could be their first or second client.
Yeah.
And they may have very little track record, but when you look into their actual resumes of what they did, some of them are incredibly talented creatives or whatever, and you can get them on the cheap because I don't mean on the cheap, but you can get them certainly significantly less than you would have got them if they were still at the big agency. So absolutely, yeah. So smaller agencies can be good.
Another good subpoint to our choosing wisely is you're choosing people. If there's the idea we're contracting to an agency, but you're really choosing people. So who are the people we're going to work with? And are going to be able to really help us succeed at whatever the project is, and and
there's that. I mean, having come from the agency, there's that chemistry meeting. That's what they describe it in terms of the agency, and that's really important. To your point you were making earlier on about how much effort we need to put into selecting this agency. Well, that chemistry part's really important. So try and do something little with them just to understand you can work together, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we've set our expectation internally. We're choosing wisely. We've selected our very finest agency that we're looking for. So what do we do next?
We're going to set them up for success. So, the typical thing is you're going to have a kickoff meeting where all the stakeholders get together, come have a big discussion, et cetera. And so defining who the stakeholders are on your side and who the stakeholders are on their side is really important. And if those people, if there are stakeholders who are not at the meeting, who are they, and and what are the outcomes they're interested in? So if you're part of the marketing team, but that it's the president or the CEO of the company who's really interested in the outcomes, then let's make sure we know that they know that is the case. Yeah,
and that's that. I mean, those RACI models that you put together, so who because that's important for the agency as well as you, because the amount of cycles that get spun because an approval process wasn't realized, and then something you bring in a new approver, it changes everything, and then the agency is suddenly overbilling and looking for change on your SOA, your SOW, right? So that is
that's another key one. I'm adding to my notes. Define the approval process, because I have been hung up with either a certain executive did not make themselves available, or they didn't know to respond so quickly, or it's like, can I get another view of round of changes? And it's like, so understanding that approval process is going to be pretty critical. And that's one of the things, like in that first meeting, defining stakeholders, define who the single point of contact is, which we talked about a little bit earlier. I mean, that's incredibly important. So who is that person? Point to that person. She's the one, he's the one who everything is going to go through.
And the other thing about that is you're going to care about that possibly more than the agency will, right? They're not going to have that same internals, pressures and balances and stuff. So you have to take some control over that process, right?
But they're definitely, if the process goes awry, they're going to be very willing to bill for the additional hours.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So they may not be quite as motivated to make this as efficient as possible as you might be from a billing perspective.
Absolutely. Unless they've had experience with you and they're like, okay, this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, nobody wants to have that conversation anyway, right? So it's good for the agency and good for you if you can bring the thing in on budget.
Yeah.
And the approval process, in my experience, has been one of the biggest challenges to bringing things in on time and on budget.
And that's whether the work's internal or external.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, so we've defined the stakeholders and we've got that RACI model, the approval process. What else we got to do?
We got to set very clear goals. So what does success look like? How are the outcomes going to be measured? Are there interim steps in terms of measuring our progress? How are we going to track the progress? Are there, and sort of putting together, and I know, when I've worked as a consultant, it's like, okay, let's define when are the check-in times, when are the input sessions, when are the interim reports, when's the final report or the final decision, when do things go live, so you want to give them the information so that they can come back. Like if you're having your initial meeting and the result of the meeting is going to be like a statement of work or something that they come back to you with, and you want to give them everything that they know so they can build out that milestone timeline, so that everyone's clear about this is what's going to happen when, and this is when the CMO needs to be available to review things. This is when, and obviously all that stuff changes. But the more loosey goosey you are about it at the front end, then the worse things the more things can go sideways.
Well, it's exactly your point at the beginning, is make sure that you put enough time into the project to be able to do that, because you can't always trust the agency with their project management. They'll bill you for it, but you need to make sure that you're on top of the project as well, and you have a project manager as well, right?
And making sure that, as much as we were talking about, your buying access to people, is if the agency has a really good project manager as well, that is a key to success in terms of choosing an agency wisely. The other thing is you've got to be open to sharing as much as possible, because you'll likely sign a non-disclosure agreement. You may sign a master services agreement, and you'll have the discussion. We're part of the team, so we want to act as part of the team. So be as open as possible with them. Share as much as possible. Communicate honestly, consistently. Almost as if they were now on staff, because you should have your protections in case they, would misuse any information you share with them. And I think most agencies, certainly that are worth their salt and have a decent track record, will honor that. So really being open and, sharing as much as possible is a key to success.
Love it. Yeah. So those are our three key steps, right? So we set the expectations up front, we choose wisely, and then we set the project up for success. I suspect, we're almost up to 20 minutes already. I suspect we could probably done 20 minutes on each of those three.
We probably could, and something to come back to, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is a really rich topic, especially with the experience that we've had and some of the war stories probably that we could tell.
Yes, there are names I do not want to name.
Yes, and also, I missed something. And then finally, what do we do?
Oh, you measure. Measure is that you want to make sure that what you're asking them to do is something that you can measure the results in some way or shape or form over some period of time. So the measurement's going to be the key to making sure you feel good about the work that they did, and they feel good about the work they're doing for you, as opposed to, I just like them. Yeah. I had great conversations. Well, we had fun. We talked, we laughed.
But sometimes, isn't it like a project turns into that thing that needs to get done, and when it gets done, there's more of a sigh of relief than there is of any joy in it, right? And it's kind of like, I really don't want to see you people for another couple of months. You know what I mean? It's just, it becomes that thing that millstone around your neck. Anyway, so that was the final thing: measure. And our final agenda item, now we've done not only the weather, the news, and the marketing topic, is what song shall I play out
We
with?
should play out with, actually, this is your suggestion, Come Together, which is the Beatles song redone by Marcus Miller, kind of a real funk version of a funky song. And obviously, when you're working with an agency, you want everything to come together under you, which is you're the client. But what was interesting is, because I was like, what was this? I'm very familiar with that song. What was it about? Yeah. And it turned out that the song came as John Lennon of the Beatles was going to write a campaign song for Timothy Leary, the the LSD guy who was running in a campaign against Ronald Reagan, who eventually became our president. And so the whole thing was like come together under him, and so. Whatever happened to the campaign song, the Beatles obviously released it as a very different song, and Mr. Leary complained to Mr. Lennon, and John Lennon said, basically, it's like, he complained the fact that the song was so different and that, he was reusing what he'd given to Timothy Leary. And he's like, well, it's like I'm the tailor and you're the customer. You ordered a suit and you never returned it and never returned to pick it up. So I sold it to somebody else.
I love that. And also, I love how this story is a piece of creative that was created by John Lennon for a client.
That's
Timothy
right.
Leary. And it's so on topic with our particular
And Mr.
thing.
Leary misused it or didn't make the most of it. And so, hey, I've got better. I can make more money if I sell this commercially.
Yes. And then Marcus Miller covered it in 1995, which is my favorite version.
I think it's been covered by
loads of people. I love the Marcus Miller version. I've seen him in concert, and so hence my suggestion for the Marcus Miller version.
Thank you very much.
I'll play out with now, and then the final point, Jeff. Will I see you in the studio next week?
Absolutely. I'll be back in the studio, and we'll welcome you in gladly.
I look forward to it, mate. I'll see you then.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jeff. That was Marcus Miller's version of Come Together by the Beatles from 1995. If you have any suggestions or comments about the topics we discussed, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us at hello@rockstarcmo.com. Right. Time to go backstage with my guest. Andrew Davies is the Chief Marketing Officer at Paddle, a complete payments infrastructure for high-growth software companies currently serving over 3,000 customers. Previously, Andrew was VP of Corporate Marketing at Optimizely, formerly Episerver, where he led global strategy for demand gen, brand, digital, ABM and content after it acquired the business he co-founded, Ideo, where, as a co-founder and CMO, he helped build Ideo from scratch to a market leader in B2B content personalization. And as you'll hear, during his time at Optimizely, they integrated 5 acquisitions and rebranded the entire company. I really enjoyed meeting Andrew. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, Andrew?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Now, before I press record, we discovered all sorts of things about how we must already know each other as we've sort of bypassed our careers and been in a lot of similar places. But for people that don't sort of know you like I do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm based in the sunny southwest of England with my wife and kids. Loving living the remote life, slightly more remote than some, but much less than others. And I'm currently serving Paddle.com as CMO. And before that, after university, built a company called Ideo, which was a B2B personalization platform. We can dig into some of the long and winding road behind that. It's interesting.
That's my intention, yeah.
And then exited that and worked for the acquirer for a couple of years. And also over the last few years, I've done a whole bunch of advisory work for mostly B2B SaaS, mostly Series A, B, and C, as they kind of go through that process of startup to scale up.
Yeah, nice. So tell us a bit about Paddle that you do. Well, actually, because we're both British and we're obsessed with the weather, I'm assuming the weather's beautiful down there the same way as it is here today. Or
it is beautiful, but I see the impending doom. A rain forecast for every day for the next week. Although we live in the middle of lots of farmland with cows and sheep on either side, and the farmers are desperate for the rain. So I'm
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, now I can get back to business. So tell us a little bit about Paddle, what you're doing right now.
Yeah, sure. So it's a super interesting business. One of the phrases I've come across from our customers and others more recently is that second-time founders choose Paddle. When you're building a SaaS business, there's a whole bunch of complexity that's under the hood that you can get distracted by. Really, infrastructure you've got to build, and Paddle deals with a portion of that we call payments infrastructure. Often if you go into this building a product-led SaaS business, you'll start off with a Stripe or some other payment gateway. You'll set that up, super simple. But then as soon as you scale, there's complexity. As soon as you go international, there's multiple currencies, payment acceptance methods, there's different tax rates in every jurisdiction, there's fraud issues, then you've got to deal with subscription management. All of those things become quite a cumbersome stack you have to build over time. And Paddle does all of that for one simple fee with one partner that solves everything for you. And we've got about 3,000 customers on that billing platform, pretty much all subscription software businesses, all product-led in some way. So they might have a sales team as well, but most of them have some form of checkout experience and are selling globally. And then the other piece is we bought a company called Profitwell a few months ago. Fantastic acquisition, and they bring a big SaaS metrics product, one of the leading SaaS metrics product in the market, a retention product, and a pricing product. So that's really what we do. We help you understand, operate, and grow your business by taking all of that payments infrastructure headache away from you.
Wow. So what's the normal profile of the kind of customer that you have? I mean, you just mentioned subscription software. Is that primarily it? Or what sort of size of organization?
Yeah, so it's super interesting because we've definitely got multiple different personas we're dealing with here. There's a few different points when people buy Paddle, start using Paddle. The first is launch. So software companies that have got their minimum viable product or got some form of product and now need some payment. And a lot of our customers come to us at that very first stage. They haven't even processed $1 yet. The next stage is people who are experiencing growing pains. So they've now started to put this infrastructure together and realizing they're having to add on more and more things, and probably are facing, hitting the tax thresholds in lots of territories and realizing the overhead that adds. And so they want to bring their revenue somewhere where it's just solved. And the third piece is totally the opposite, really, which is large enterprises. We serve people like Verizon, Blue Jeans, and ServiceNow, who are launching or running a product-led business line. And so they maybe have a very strong sales-led business historically, and now they're trying to launch something that's self-serve. And they want to put that entire stack and that entire business line on Paddle because it solves all of those back-office issues. So those are really the 3 points where people engage.
Right. So that final one's a bit like internal entrepreneurship then, really. It's an entrepreneurial thing. It's just sometimes it's inside a large organization, right?
Yeah, completely. So, a job title there might be head of emerging markets or something, someone who's got exactly that kind of innovative stance in terms of building a new revenue stream.
Right, cool. Okay, and then we touched on, when you were introducing yourself, we touched on IDEO, which is where we sort of could have known each other kind of thing. And we've been to a lot of the same places and know a lot of the same people. And you successfully sold IDEO to Optimizely, who were Episerver, who many of us in the CMS industry know really well, and certainly in B2B marketing tech know really well. And I've actually had the CMO, Kirsten Allegri-Williams, on the show. She was a wonderful interview. Tell us about that journey. Go right back to when you founded IDEO. What inspired your decision to actually create your own company and start that?
So, it goes back earlier than IDEO. I've got several more failures to account before we get to IDEO. I was very fortunate to be selected for Deloitte Consulting Scholarship Program when I was 17. So I think about 15 or 20 people back in those days a year would get selected for this program. I very much felt like the underdog. Everyone else went to posh private schools. I didn't. Everyone else, had been. I felt a bit of a fish out of water, moving to London to live with my relatives, to go and be part of this massive organization. I worked in firstly in audit for technology, media, and telecom firms, then in consulting. And basically, I did a year with them, and then they paid through my university, and I went there every summer and every winter holiday and did more work. And I love my time there. I've still got lifelong friends that I met during that very formative time. But it meant that after my gap year with them, I went to university with one goal, which was to start my own business so that I didn't have to accept the job offer for them on graduation.
So many different motivations I've talked to people on this show, and never that one. I wanted to get my own company so that I didn't have to accept this role.
Totally. My dad's a chartered accountant. It was the role. It was kind of the path that was set in front of me. And I love my time there, but I just wanted optionality. And so, we tried a top-end women's wear fashion label, ended up in court in my second year. We tried a translation business and then a web business, which ended up being a social media app house that did okay. And that was kind of what we graduated with. But at that point, as I graduated, I met Ed, who was my co-founder at IDEO, and he had aspirations for a much higher growth software business than the kind of agency model we had built. And so I co-founded with him as I graduated. He was going into his final year. And initially it was a music magazine. It was a personalized music magazine called IDEO Mag. It was super interesting. And then, over the course of the next couple of years, we realized that we were bridging two dying industries, publishing and the music licensing or record label industry. And so although we got it to profitable, we were able to bootstrap it. We had hundreds of thousands of readers. It was kind of, using Last FM data and iMeme data and, other music listening data in order to personalize a magazine. We realized that the value was in kind of building these interest profiles and delivering personalized content rather than anything to do with music. And so we then rebuilt the company around that, and then built a software business that was enabled other companies to use that technology to personalize their web content. So that's really the founding story there.
Wow, and that's super relevant today, isn't it? Everybody's talking about personalization, and there's some of us sort of cynics that have been around it for 2 decades, as we were discussing. I was at Vignette, who kids, you'd need to look that up. Nobody knows who they are anymore, but they were the early pioneers, I suppose, of personalization back in the day. So that's really interesting. And then how did building your own business go in that? I mean, you kind of glossed over. Then we struck on doing personalization, which is a great thing. But how did it go in those early days of getting that company together?
So, I mean, there was a phrase we were using by the end, which is, we've got to survive long enough to succeed. I wholeheartedly believed that the core we built, the technology we built, was really commercially valuable. Yeah. But we were a solution in search of a problem for years. Initially, we were applying it to the music label industry. Then we were applying it to large CPGs. We had contracts with Diageo and Unilever. We raised some funding off the back of that from Notion Capital and then some other investors. Eventually we came to this point, and I remember the management offsite where we just decided to focus. And we were told by a couple of members on our management team that focus isn't focus until saying no really hurts you because you're giving away value. And we decided to focus exclusively on enterprise technology, B2B enterprise technology, and walked out of that room and used the technology we built to, a very strong kind of purist ABM route to market, whale hunting. And we closed IBM and Salesforce and Intel and a whole bunch of top logos as a result of that decision, which led to that exit. So it was a long and winding road. We eventually found a market that needed and could pay for what we built.
That was the same. I could talk to you about this stuff for all afternoon. That was such the issue with personalization in the early days. It was a solution searching for a problem, and the complexity of implementing personalization. I don't think anybody completely understood. The content need and how you needed to understand your customer, all that kind of stuff. It was all very, very good, but you needed expertise to help you make it happen. But as you then, you had that great success, but you need to scale the business, particularly the marketing team. What's your advice on CMOs that are coming into that high growth environment and are looking to scale a marketing team? I know you've got some ideas around that.
Yeah, I guess a few things. Firstly, I think it's really important to, and these sound obvious, I guess, but they're never obvious until you're trying to put them into practice. The first one is to scale from the customer outward. I see that you've got to really deeply understand that customer and how your product fits and adds value in order to be able to build everything else. And so, when I think about the marketing function I've built now at Paddle, it's really a larger interpretation of that, which is that product marketing sits in the middle. That's how you understand your market, your competitors, your personas. Then you've got demand gen that's built outside of that, and then you've got brand that's built outside of that. So first thing I think is, focusing on that customer and building outwards. The second thing is building from the top of funnel down. I think it's too easy in a high growth environment where you've got some funding and you've got therefore expectations of funders to get the Excel spreadsheet and drag that row from left to right, and then that's your sales plan and therefore your marketing plan, and it's a guillotine above your neck. And you've probably been in that scenario. I've been in that scenario where you've got a number that's actually not based on reality. It's based on a formula that someone built. And so when I say top down, I mean, we've got to go and understand, is there the number of accounts we can serve? Is there the deal value there? Are we building enough pipeline to hire more SDRs? Now, once we've got those SDRs, have we got enough busyness in those SDRs and productivity to then hire some more sales reps? And making sure you're always coming from the top down, I think it adds a real kind of sanity to the whole mix. And then the third thing is really just making sure as you build up that team, that you're always watching for when you can bring in talent that's going to be able to bring you to a new level, and how you're investing in your existing teams and not putting a ceiling on them artificially, and making sure that they've got a leadership path too. And I think one of the proudest things of what we built at IDEO was seeing people who came in as really junior members of the team, and ended up with fantastic careers at IDEO and beyond because of the experience and the pathway that we did.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, we've talked about that the last couple of weeks actually on the podcast with my co-host Jeff. And one of the things we've seen is some of that frustration in marketing, in what's going wrong in marketing in a way, is that we don't spend enough time defining those career paths and developing our own talent and bringing people through. And that's why there's the churn. That's why people leave. And, I'd hate to say the word the great resignation, but I think we felt it quite keenly in marketing that there's been quite a high level of churn. So I think that's really interesting. That last point is really interesting. I'm going to keep going with some of my questions because I'm fascinated by your story. But because once you landed at Episerver, or Optonizely as it is now, you became the VP of Corporate Marketing. But then what you needed to do was you had to assimilate a bunch of acquisitions, including your own. And many of us have been in that situation through having worked at companies that have either I've been acquired or we've done acquiring, and I'm at a highly acquisitive company right now. So just to pick your brains on this, what's your advice to marketing leaders that are in that position where you have to work with these different brands and make quite difficult decisions about keeping those brands alive?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I think, it's so important to take loads of time to listen at the beginning when those transactions happen. And actually, usually before those acquisitions happen, ideally walking into the M&A process with at least a half-baked version of what that post-acquisition story is going to be. I think that's the listening part and the chewing over and the collaboration on that with a team you're going to acquire, I think is really important. And we felt that as acquired founders into Episerver, and we tried to replicate that with those acquisitions. So I think that's something that's really, really important. And that's not just important for the value it gives you in terms of insight. I think it's just so important to bring people along on the journey with you, because there's many acquisitions fail, as we know, and I think one of the reasons they fail is because people feel like their background, history, past, present is all not being used and not being valued. Steps 1 to 5 aren't being valued when you think about what step 6 and 7 is. So I think that's one thing that's really important. I think another piece that is so often so easy to overlook in the cut and thrust of doing a roll up is that you've got to design where you want to be in 3 or 4 years as an ideal state and work out which bit of the jigsaw this is. It's so easy to look at the pieces you've got in front of you and work out the best way of pragmatically fitting them together, which brands are strong, which are weaker. But you can get into a bit of a mess by doing that if you haven't got a clear view of what you're trying to build and where this gets you. And then, just it's a useful thing I find for most decisions. But, in a world where we're building stuff that's hard, just don't try to swim upstream. Like if it feels complicated and if people aren't getting what you're talking about, it's usually not the right thing. And just using that as a simple test for me, a rule of thumb, I think is super interesting. Go for it.
Sorry, no, I mean, I love that. I love that your approach there to the acquisition, because before I hit record, we were talking about a mutual, it's boss for me. I think he was your chairman, David Eldridge. And when we got acquired, when I worked at Media Surface and we stepped into Auterion, what I liked there was they had a story already in place for why they were acquiring the company I worked for. And that's so important that you as an employee, I mean, fairly senior employee as I was, but for everybody, as you walk in and go, these guys have got a plan. We're part of a plan, rather than how often do you see like, we've got this opportunity to acquire this company. Let's make this shit up as we go along, And what's the story? Well, I think and you sometimes see it even from externally, don't you? From the PR, you think, hang on, they're making this up as they go along. This isn't a match made in heaven. This was a match made by some VCs or something, and now they're trying to create a story around it, right? So I think that story thing is so essential.
Yeah, no, 100% agree.
Yeah. So, and talking about rebranding, one of the challenges I think we all have when we work for a company that's either been acquired or doing acquiring is what do you do with the brands? And and every company that I'm aware of that's been acquired always talks about how they've got brand equity, how their brand is so important, and you can't transition away. We can't possibly leave this. But I thought it was remarkable, and I spoke to Kirsten about it when she was on the show, that Episerver took a really interesting view in that they then rebranded themselves as one of their acquisitions, right? So they went from Episerver to Optimizely. Yep. And I know you were there and you were part of that decision. So tell us about that process and how you came to decide that actually Episerver, a brand I know really well after 2 decades in the CMS industry, was not what you wanted to go forward with. You wanted to go forward with Optimizely.
Yeah, this was a really fun process. I worked super closely with Kirsten and with Alex, the CEO there on this. I think a few things that led us to that decision. Fundamentally, when I came in the door at Episerver, totally understood that there was this very strong European-centric, audience that deeply knew and understood Episerver. But the name itself is problematic, right? If you look at, server is something we're trying to get everyone to migrate away from, and it's a dirty word.
Yeah.
And which was how they framed their logo. It wasn't called Episerver. The brand logo was Epi. If you look at the search terms for that, it's a medical issue. You've got a challenge there instantly, right? With just overall perception. So when we acquired Optimizely, I think it was in myself and Alex and Kirsten's mind that this might be somewhere we went, but we clearly wanted to be very data driven around it. And so we did a piece of research with an external agency called Vertic, and we basically showed that, number one, there was lots of areas of complement and synergy. So Optimizely had a very strong, still has a very strong top of funnel content play. They have this glossary that's driving over 1 million visits a year to a bunch of search terms, including CMS. They have the web snippet for CMS, some really valuable pieces there, and had been much stronger at investing in that long-term play. But Episerver was much stronger in kind of the later deal stages. So we had loads of analyst proof, loads of community, loads of documentation, loads of partner deployers. Yeah. And so suddenly there's a kind of a reason to believe why bringing these two content areas together could strengthen any deal cycle. But then also when we looked at the associations, Optimizely was associated with innovation, experimentation, perceived as a forward-looking brand, had a strong US awareness, whereas Episerver has a strong EU base, but almost no US awareness. And I mentioned the complications over the name, and so fundamentally. We felt it was easier and higher yield to reposition Optimizely as a leader in digital experience rather than just experimentation than it was to reinvent Episerver as a modern brand, particularly for the US. And that's what the decision came down to.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant because I'm probably one of the stick in the muds that you had to convince. Right? What the hell are you doing? Getting rid of Episerver? That seems weird. But I think no, I'm not saying I was displeased. It's just a quite not a shock is too strong a word, but it was quite a surprising move. And I think, but I like what you're saying there because I think we all need to reimagine our brands and redevelop and move forward. So understanding the brand attributes of the brands that you have when you've got a portfolio like that and which one matches the future of what your brand wants to be, if you like, because all brands have those attributes, don't they? And the attributes of Episerver were great 10 years ago, not the ones that you wanted to go with going forward. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and a bold decision. I thought it was great. And blimey, I've just seen the time. And I always say that almost at every interview. It's like, good Lord. So for the final question, we have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO called the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, where we throw all the bullshit, snake-oil and overhyped trends that plague this industry. We love. What would you chuck in?
I'll chuck in a reasonably controversial one, which is the everyone's got to create a category. The category creation for everybody myth. I've got multiple of the books here right beside me, but at IDEO we created a subcategory that then got badged by Forrester, badged by Gartner. At Optimizely, I think we were competing in 17 separate analyst reports.
Oh my
It's
God.
a huge bit of project there. But the myth that every startup has to dominate by creating their own category, I think, is leading to massive confusion in the eyes of the buyer and the analysts and the vendors themselves.
Well, oh my God, I could talk to you about this topic for 20 minutes, I'm sure. And I don't know if I saw Play Bigger as the book Play Big feature when you just showed me that book. But I also think there's a level of collusion as well with the analysts, because I think there are analysts out there that are trying to find their own little hill to die on, or their own rock that they can claim, and then they collude with the vendors, and suddenly a category, a new fucking TLA is invented, right? And it's what we're really good at as marketers, isn't it? No, we're not the People's Front of Judea, we're the Judeans, and that dates me hugely. And even you're going to have to look up Monty Python, kids.
I'm a Monty Python fan.
I love that. I love that for the pool. I think that's definitely going to go in. So sorry that we're running out of time. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Nice to meet you. But when the listeners spin the dial on the interwebs, where will they find you?
Sorry, say that again. When?
I had this the other week as well. When listeners spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you? LinkedIn, Twitter, that kind of stuff.
Sorry. I missed the word interwebs, and I was wondering if I was missing the context here. So, super happy on LinkedIn and Twitter. Feel free to grab me there, Andrew Davies. Mm-hmm. If you're in the real world, though, SaaStr and SaaStock, the two big SaaS conferences coming up in the next couple of months, we'll have a big presence at, meeting loads of customers and prospects. So we do exist in real life as well.
Nice. Well, I'll include all those links in the show notes. Thank you very much for your time, Andrew. I really enjoyed that. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks, Andrew, and a great nomination for the pool for anyone in B2B tech. The fact that we're always creating new acronyms and categories. Right, it's the end of the week. Time to wind down, and where better than the Rockstar CMO virtual bar, where I find my friend and content marketing guru Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. This week, I have to say, I look around the bar and there just seems to be, what is that? I think it's one guy over in the corner playing is he playing like a blues or something? Just like this really steel guitar, sort of, bluesy. Oh, I see. It's just a blues guy, just sitting in the corner, playing blues guitar. I like it. I like that you've sort of set a mood with the whole blues.
Yes,
guitar here.
We're a blues. Let me catch up. Yes, we're a blues.
Maybe a little harmonica too. Oh, I hear a little harmonica there. Yeah, that's good stuff.
I think after a couple of weeks ago, where you had Man United fans in here, you've let me off lightly with just a decent man playing the blues on a steel guitar. That's right. Wonderful. And doesn't he sound great?
He does. He does sound great, and it's a really nice mood-setting place for our cocktail this week, which we're going to pay a little homage to the dude, and we're going to make, because I haven't had it in a while, and I sort of had a hankering for it, a classic White Russian. And so it's basically, the classic White Russian. You're familiar with the movie, of course, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I'm familiar with Black Russians. I'm not that familiar with drinking White Russians, to be honest with you, but I'm willing to try.
Okay, all right. Well, it's basically it's as simple as it gets. It's a vodka drink. With heavy cream, and that's the important part, is a heavy cream, a heavy whipping cream. Not whipped, of course, but a heavy cream, which is oddly hard to find in London, by the way. I like my coffee with heavy cream. And, you ask for that in a restaurant, and it's like it's like you've got four heads or something. Anyway.
Wow.
So you've got your vodka, your heavy cream, and, of course, a coffee liqueur. And so basically, the Black Russian is just without the heavy cream. That's all.
Yes.
And so your White Russian is the heavy cream, the coffee liqueur, and the vodka mixed together. And as you saw the dude do in the movie, mix it all up together, and it's a lovely thing. It's basically an iced coffee with vodka in it, but we'll get fancy and call it the White Russian. So that's our drink.
Splendid. And I think it's a symbol of how things have moved on with London hospitality, that it's actually heavy cream that's the challenge. Just getting any service used to be the problem. So
yeah, well, there is that too.
Well done, London.
There is that. Yes.
It wasn't just spam and chips. But anyway, so I'm in commemorating the dude and drinking these White Russians. Where would we be drinking these? Where are we going to transport the bar to this week?
Well, I'm still trying to get out of the heat up here in Southern California.
Yes.
So I think I think somewhere near you. I have this very strong urge to get to the UK. I haven't been in so long. I mean, I say so long, and it's been. I think I was there in March.
You were.
And thank you and for keeping my travel schedule for me. But it is most years I would get there 2, 3, 4 times in a year. And, it is one of my favorite places. So I think somewhere, and I would let you pick the exact spot, but somewhere in the greater London area, maybe not just downtown where all the tourists go, maybe somewhere outside, that we could find a spot, a cool spot as fall starts to set. And we have one of these White Russians together.
I love it. And last time you were in London, I chose where we were based on their tequila menu. And this time I would need to choose it on the fact they've got heavy cream.
That's right. Which is, I'm telling you now, is a difficult thing. I every time I'm there, I'm at these, and I stay at these nicer hotels too. And they all look at me like, really? Heavy cream? What are you, crazy? By the way, I get the same reaction in New York. It's not just London. It's New York is a similar thing. That's like, if it's not milk in your coffee, they don't know what to do.
Well, like my White Russians, I like my coffee black. So I don't have that challenge either.
There you go.
All right, so we're sipping these White Russians in a London bar of my choice that's found some heavy cream, fortunately. And our conversation turns to marketing. What are we going to be chatting
Well, we're going to
this
talk
week?
a little bit about more.
More.
Yeah. And, this is the cue, right, for the disco song, more, more, more.
Oh, you know what I've forgotten to do? I haven't made my drink.
Well, you should make your drink. You should make your drink.
Got carried away with I'm sitting here with an empty glass. What's going on? So anyway, I'm going to attempt to make that very drink with only the ingredients on my desktop bar. So
it's a good thing that the theme this week is more, because you need more in your glass.
Well, yes, I certainly do. And moments like this, maybe I've had too much in my glass, and this is the problem. And I went for them again. It's another vodka week this week, and I've gone for the most Scottish of vodkas, Hendrick's Gin.
Ah, yes.
In which I have slopped into there. And then I don't have coffee liqueur or any heavy cream, which won't surprise you, actually, that an English bar does not have heavy cream. But what we do have is some very heavy tonic water with the weight of cucumber in it.
I see. That sounds lovely.
What I would say to you, though, is this drink is on the lighter side. That's delicious, Robert. And I know that we're doing things all in the wrong order now, but what are we calling those?
I would call that a White Russian. Yes, we'd call that maybe in your case we'd call that a White Londoner or something. Yeah,
something. All right, and then let's get back to the conversation now. I've made myself a drink, so we're going to talk about more, Robert.
We are going to talk about more, and it's funny because there's a really interesting thing. This is something that I've come to lately, which is. I see so many marketing strategies based on this idea of more, and I'll get to what I mean by that, because So golf. I'm not a golfer. Are you a golfer?
No, I did do 9 holes once. I wasn't very good.
Okay. So you do golf, you just don't do it particularly well, which is the story of most golfers, I suspect.
I have golf. The amusing part of that story was that the guy that was showing me how to do it was an actual golfer, and he was having a really shit day. And I was and it made me laugh so hard that he was getting so frustrated with his own golf while I poodled around. But anyway, that was
I see.
Yes, I don't golf on a regular basis.
Well, I don't do golf at all.
No.
And I find what I'm intrigued by, however, with the entire golf is that the entire goal of golf is to actually play the least amount of golf.
That's true.
If you think about it, the winner in a golf game is the one who played the least amount of it.
Yes.
And interestingly, so I find marketing should be a similar kind of approach. And and I'll tell you why, because specific with content marketing, for example, clients will often talk to me and they'll say something like, everybody in our business wants more content. They need more content, but they don't even use what we create. So we're a little bit at a crossroads here.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that seems really counterintuitive. If they're just wasting it, why don't you just produce less of it? And then they'll come back to me and they'll go, well, we could produce less and we might waste a smaller percentage of it, but everybody still wants more. And it's like if you give them the fire hose of content, you waste so much, but at least everybody's, sort of perceived thirst is quenched. But if you give them the garden hose of just the right amount of content, everybody wants more. They want more. And marketing is the same way, right? There's sort of this default to how much marketing should we do? More is the answer. That should be the strategy. More leads, more content, more marketing, more reach, more, opportunities, more sales. Because why? Well, because the theory is that it mitigates the risk. If you can do more of it, then you're just pouring more over the top of it. And despite how much is wasted, you'll get what you need. And that becomes the goal when we're trying to do just about anything. And it's interesting because I used to even answer the question. A lot of people would ask, like clients or students in workshops or anything, and they would say, how much content should we be producing? And I used to, knowing that the answer was going to be more is needed, I would say as much as you can be great at. And my theory behind that answer was, well, you should deliver as much content as you can while you maintain some level of quality standard that you theoretically have set. But now what I realize is that result is wrong because it immediately rationalizes not creating the right kind of strategy. In other words, what I'm saying is that what we want to do is we want to switch the question not to how do we do more, but how do we do enough? Because more is not enough. Enough is enough. And if you think about that for a minute, think about any great movie you saw or any great book or any great play or any great, piece of art that you've seen, and it leaves you wanting more, right? It leaves but the reason it leaves you wanting more is because it was enough. It was just enough to meet the goal of making you want more. And, Great Gatsby, perfect example. That novel is 180 pages. It's short. It's very short. Classic film Casablanca. It's 100 minutes. It's barely an hour and a half long. Perfect length for that. The Better Call Saul, wonderful TV series that literally just ended a couple of weeks ago after 6 seasons. And they ended it just when it should have ended. And that's the key is that how many times have we watched a movie, read a novel, seen a TV series, especially streaming series these days, and go, that was okay, but it should have been 3 episodes, not 8, right? And it's a classic symptom of let's do more because more is our default. Now, that's not to say that long content can't be good, right? War and Peace is 1,200 pages. It wouldn't be War and Peace if it wasn't War and Peace in 1,200 pages. But what I've seen is that where marketing teams are successful, and specifically in content teams, where they're successful, is where they have defaulted the question to out of what more can we do and how do we do enough? And the reason is because enough focuses on the impact that we're having. It forces us to say, if how much is enough, we say, well, enough to what? Right?
Yeah.
Enough to draw the right leads, enough to set an objective that we need to fulfill the sales enablement team, enough that we need to create 1,000 subscribers, enough to what? Enough to set that goal. And once we define that goal, now it's game on for, content golf, right? Marketing golf. Basically, how little can we actually swing our clubs to meet that goal, because that will be enough. And if for some reason you find yourself with nothing to do, which is ridiculous, of course, but if you find yourself with time on your hands, maybe we should spend that time thinking about what kind of content would be enough to fill the enough, rather than sort of just defaulting to assembling more and more and more. And so that's I think a new approach to getting to a objective-based strategy.
Oh, this is such good advice, like for anything, really, isn't it? Because we're in such a hustle culture. Like, more is just more. Do more. Work harder, work longer, create more content, even just from a personal perspective.
That's right.
From a team perspective. And I just love that thing about golf. Play as little as you can. I think that's great advice for anybody. Play as little as you can and be really good at it when you do it. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it helps us rethink. What I like about it is that it forces us to rationalize an objective-based strategy rather than simply defaulting to more activity. And so, because if you can define enough, now all of a sudden, it's you start creating toward the goal rather than letting the goal create you. And that's, that is an important part, because, we just have more things to do these days than to sit around and assemble more content, or assemble more campaigns, or assemble more reports, or assemble more technology. And if we don't know how much is enough, then any of those activities are just as important. Yeah,
no, I love it. And I mean, you've probably had this experience with your consulting as well, as if you go and talk to an organization. I've actually had the situation where it's like, okay, so you're looking to do this amount of business. This means you'll need this number of opportunities and this number of deals, and you'll need this number of SQL, working my way up the pipeline, and realizing that actually they need to do a lot less than they thought they did. If they focused really hard on what they actually needed to do to make their target, then they didn't, starting from the top of the pipeline, how much marketing they needed to do rather than at the bottom and working their way up. Sometimes you don't need to play that much golf.
It's a great point, because the first pushback you get on that kind of idea is, well, we have no idea how much is enough. And the reason is because they've never measured. They've never taken the time to understand how much is enough, right? How much did it take to actually create 100 leads, or 10,000 subscribers, or a loyal customer, or whatever it is. They just go, oh, it was a lot, right? We created a lot of stuff. We did a lot of things, but we don't really understand the activities that we did. Look, this is not a science. This is not going to get down to a flywheel of saying, do X, get Y, right? Marketing has never been like that. Content has never been like that. It's not a situation where you go, you can algorithmically figure out exactly how much you're going to need to fulfill against the enough question. Marketing has always been an art and a science. But if you take your intention and set it that way, like you would in golf, right? How many strokes is enough to win the game? You don't know. You just know that it's as least as you possibly can against the opponent that you have, which might be yourself in some cases.
I was going to say that. Yeah. I mean, if you're producing loads and loads of content, your content is competing with your own content.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Oh, that's an excellent point. All right. So if people are looking to do a round, I can't do this analogy. I've lost my plot. Looking for a round of content, where might they find a course on which to play?
Where might they tee off?
Yes.
For content? Oh my gosh, we can do puns all day. You'll find us at contentadvisory.net. Just skip the nonsense.
Splendid. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, Robert?
Oh, find us at this wonderful little place called LinkedIn. It's a little startup company that I think has got a little bit of promise to it.
Yes, I've heard of it. It's a bit like that Truth Social thing, isn't it? Only more profitable.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
All right, mate. Well, and for me, will you be in the bar next week?
I will. I will be at Content Marketing World, so we can have a little bit of a discussion about that. So it'll be a little bit of a different discussion, I suspect, because I'll be just coming off of 4 days of Content Marketing World.
I think you'll need a drink, my friend.
Indeed.
All right, I'll see you then. Cheers, buddy. Thank you, Robert. So we need to market like we're playing golf. I love it. So that's a wrap on episode 131 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Andrew and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them. I'll include all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com, where you can find all our previous episodes. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasty jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know on the socials, or please drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, I go backstage with fashion designer turned B2B marketer Galina Sobolev. And as you heard, Jeff will be in the studio and Robert will be in the bar. Until then, have a great week. And I hope you'll again join us next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.